Nestled deep within a labyrinth of jagged cliffs and ancient pines, Whispering Hollow is a place that feels like it's been forgotten by time. The town lies hidden in a remote valley where the air carries the sharp scent of evergreen and the faint chill of secrets too old to name. Few roads lead here, and those that do are narrow, winding paths that twist through dense forests, as if the mountains themselves conspire to keep outsiders at bay. Travelers who stumble upon Whispering Hollow often describe an inexplicable pull, a quiet urging that draws them closer, only to leave them with a lingering unease they can't quite explain. The settlement itself is small, a scattering of weathered log cabins and stone cottages clustered along a single main street, their windows glowing faintly against the encroaching dusk. To the untrained eye, it's a quaint, unremarkable place. Locals chopping wood, tending small gardens, or exchanging nods at the general store. But beneath this veneer of simplicity runs a current of mystery, one that hums in the silences between conversations and in the way the townsfolk's eyes dart toward the forest when the wind carries a distant howl. Whispering Hollow is a town that guards its truths fiercely. Over the years, rumors have drifted beyond its borders, carried by the few who pass through and fewer who stay. These tales speak of strange happenings under the cover of night, unearthly howls that echo beneath a full moon, too raw to belong to any ordinary beast. Locals, when pressed, dismiss such stories as folklore, the kind of exaggerated tales born from long winters and overactive imaginations. Yet their dismissals are too quick, their smiles too tight, and their glances too furtive when the subject of wolves arises. Visitors often leave with more questions than answers, their minds snagged on half-heard whispers about the clan, or cryptic warnings to avoid the woods after dusk. Some swear they've seen shapes moving in the shadows, swift, silent figures too large to be mere animals, too deliberate to be mistaken for a coincidence. Others speak of an oppressive stillness in the air, as if the valley itself holds its breath, waiting for something to stir. In recent months, these rumors have grown sharper, fueled by a series of incidents that have set the town abuzz with equal parts curiosity and dread. Livestock have vanished from nearby farms, their pens left with claw marks too deep for any known predator. Strange tracks have appeared in the mud near the river, larger than a wolf's and oddly precise, as if made by something that walks with purpose. At the town's only cafe, a weathered building with creaking floors and mismatched chairs, hushed conversations turn to these events, only to falter when a stranger enters. The locals' guarded nature is palpable. They value secrecy as much as survival, and their wariness of outsiders is as much a part of Whispering Hollow as the mist that clings to its hills. It's said that the town has its own kind of guardians, though no one will say exactly what or who they are. The name Kai surfaces now and then, spoken in tones of reverence or fear, but no one clarifies his role. Is he a protector, a myth, or something else entirely? The answer remains as elusive as the shadows that flicker at the forest's edge. Into this enigmatic world steps Elara, a young woman with a restless spirit and a past she'd rather leave behind. At 26, she spent her life drifting through crowded cities, chasing stability, but never quite finding it. Her dark hair is often pulled into a loose braid, and her sharp green eyes miss little, though they carry the weight of someone who's seen more than she lets on. Elara arrives in Whispering Hollow on a crisp autumn afternoon, her old pickup truck rattling along the uneven road as golden leaves drift across the windshield. She's come seeking a fresh start, drawn by the promise of quiet and the kind of solitude only a place like this can offer. The town has no welcome sign, no official boundary, but as the road curves and the valley opens before her, Elara feels a shift, like stepping into a world that operates by its own unspoken rules. The air feels heavier, charged with an energy she can't name, as though something unseen brushes past her in the wind. From the moment she sets foot in Whispering Hollow, Elara senses she's being watched. Locals pause mid-task as her truck rolls by, their gazes lingering a beat too long before they return to their work. At the general store, where she stops to buy supplies, the clerk, a grizzled man with a scar across his knuckles, offers a curt nod, but no small talk. The cafe, with its faint aroma of burnt coffee and fresh bread, is no warmer. Conversations hush as she enters, and the few patrons seated at the counter study her with a mix of curiosity and caution. Yet Elara, stubborn and determined, refuses to be rattled. She's faced skepticism before, in cities where no one cared to know her name. Whispering Hollow, she tells herself, is just another challenge, a puzzle she'll solve by settling in and proving she belongs. Her first days are spent unpacking in a small, rented cabin on the town's outskirts, its wooden walls weathered but sturdy, its windows offering a view of the towering pines that hem the valley. The cabin is modest, with a single bedroom, a cramped kitchen, and a fireplace that crackles with the scent of cedar. As she arranges her few belongings, a worn journal, a handful of books, a photo of her late mother, Elara feels a flicker of hope. This could be home, she thinks, a place to finally plant roots. But that hope is tempered by the oddities she begins to notice. At night, the silence is broken by distant howls, sharp and haunting, that seem to ripple through the valley like a warning. Lights in neighboring cabins burn late, well past midnight, and once, while fetching water from the well, she catches a glimpse of movement in the trees. Swift, shadowy, gone before she can be sure. The townsfolk, too, are a study in contrasts. Some offer guarded smiles, like the elderly woman who runs the post office and slips Elara an extra stamp with a knowing wink. Others, like the young man who delivers firewood, avoid her gaze entirely, his shoulders tense as if he's carrying more than just logs. Whispers follow her wherever she goes, snippets of conversation that stop when she draws near, words like clan and full moon lingering in the air like smoke. At the cafe, she overhears a cryptic exchange about keeping the balance, spoken in low tones by two men who fall silent when they notice her listening. Elara's curiosity, already sharp, begins to burn brighter. She's no stranger to secrets. She's kept her own for years. But Whispering Hollow's mysteries feel different, primal, as if the town itself is alive with them. As the days pass, Elara's resolve strengthens. She's determined to unravel the truth behind the rumors, to understand why the locals guard their words so carefully, and what lies behind the howls that pierce the night. She doesn't yet know that her arrival has stirred something in Whispering Hollow, a ripple that will soon grow into a wave. The valley, with its dense forests and hidden trails, holds more than just stories. It harbors truths that have shaped the town for generations. And Elara, with her stubborn heart and unyielding curiosity, is about to step into the heart of them, unaware that her presence will awaken forces long dormant, forces that will test her courage and redefine her place in a world she thought she understood. The road to Whispering Hollow stretched before Elara like a ribbon of uncertainty.
its gravel crunching under the tires of her battered pickup truck. The late October sun hung low, casting golden streaks through the dense canopy of pines that loomed over the narrow path. At 26, Elara carried the weight of a life spent in motion, city after city, each one promising a fresh start, but delivering only fleeting connections. Her dark hair, loosely braided, swayed as she leaned forward to peer through the windshield, her sharp green eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain. She'd left behind the clamor of urban life, honking horns, crowded sidewalks, and the constant hum of ambition for the quiet of this remote valley. Whispering Hollow, she'd read in a faded travel guide, was a place where time seemed to pause, a sanctuary for those seeking solace. For Elara, it was a chance to finally belong somewhere, to plant roots in soil that didn't shift beneath her feet. The town emerged gradually, as if reluctant to reveal itself. The road curved sharply, and suddenly the valley opened up, revealing a cluster of log cabins and stone cottages nestled among towering evergreens. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the faint glow of lanterns flickered in windows, though the streets were nearly empty. Elara slowed her truck, the engine's rumble loud in the stillness, and felt a prickle at the back of her neck, a sensation she couldn't name but didn't dismiss. There was no welcome sign, no marker to announce her arrival. Yet the air felt different here, heavier, as if charged with an unseen energy. She parked near a small general store, its weathered sign reading "Hollow Goods" in peeling paint, and stepped out, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The scent of pine and damp moss filled her lungs, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. Elara's first task was practical, settling into the cabin she'd rented sight unseen. The landlord, a gruff voice on the phone, had promised a modest place on the town's edge, and as she drove to it, she passed a handful of locals. A woman with silver-streaked hair paused mid-sweep on her porch, her gaze lingering on Elara's truck with a mix of curiosity and caution. Two men hauling firewood near the road glanced up, their conversation halting abruptly. Before they resumed with lowered voices, Elara offered a small wave, but only one nodded back, his expression unreadable. She told herself it was just small-town wariness. New faces are rare here after all. But the weight of their stares stayed with her as she reached her new home.
The cabin was small but sturdy, its wooden walls weathered to a soft gray, its slanted roof dotted with pine needles. Inside, it smelled of cedar and thyme, with a stone fireplace dominating the main room, a cramped kitchen, and a single bedroom barely large enough for the iron-frame bed. Elara unpacked her few belongings, a worn leather journal, a stack of dog-eared paperbacks, and a framed photo of her mother, whose smile seemed to carry a quiet strength Elara longed to emulate. As she arranged these on a rickety shelf, she felt a flicker of hope. This place, with its creaking floors and drafty windows, could be a beginning. She imagined mornings spent sipping coffee by the fire, evenings writing in her journal under the stars. But as dusk fell, that hope mingled with an unease she couldn't shake. Her first night in Whispering Hollow was restless. The silence of the valley was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. Yet, sometime after midnight, a sound pierced the quiet, a low, mournful howl that seemed to rise from the heart of the forest. It wasn't the sharp bark of a dog or the yip of a coyote. It was deeper, almost primal, sending a shiver down Elara's spine. She sat up in bed, clutching the quilt, and listened as the howl faded, only to be answered by another, fainter, but no less unsettling. She told herself it was just wildlife, wolves perhaps, though the guidebook hadn't mentioned them. Still, the sound lingered in her mind, like a warning whispered in a language she didn't yet understand. Her first night in Whispering Hollow, Elara ventured into town, determined to make connections. At Hollow Goods, she bought essentials, coffee, bread, a few cans of soup, while the clerk, a man with a scar across his knuckles, rang her up in silence. His name tag read Amos, and though you offered a curt nod, his eyes flicked to the door as if expecting someone to interrupt. "New here?" he asked finally, his voice rough but not unkind. Elara nodded, offering a smile. "Just moved in, hoping to stay a while." Amos grunted, handing her the change. "Mind the woods at night," he said, almost as an afterthought, before turning to restock a shelf. The words, casual yet pointed, stayed with her as she left. At the cafe, a low-slung building called the Pine Kettle, Elara found a similar mix of warmth and wariness. The air smelled of burnt coffee and fresh pastries, and a handful of patrons sat at mismatched tables, their conversations low and deliberate. As she ordered a coffee, she noticed the barista, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a guarded smile, watching her closely. "Passing through?" the barista asked, sliding the mug across the counter. "Staying, actually," Elara replied, keeping her tone light. The woman raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more, though Elara caught her exchanging a glance with an older man at a corner table. Their conversation paused, and Elara felt the weight of their scrutiny, subtle but undeniable.
Over the next few days, Elara began to notice patterns. The townsfolk were polite but distant, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. At the post office, an elderly woman named Mabel slipped her an extra stamp with a wink, saying, "You'll need it for letters home." But when Elara asked about the howls she'd heard, Mabel's expression tightened, and she muttered something about just the wind before changing the subject. At the cafe, Elara overheard snippets of conversation that stopped when she drew near. Phrases like "the clan" and "keeping watch" spoken in hushed tones. Once, as she walked back to her cabin at dusk, she saw a group of locals gathered near the edge of town, their heads bent together, their voices dropping as she passed. One word stood out: Kai. It was spoken with a reverence that bordered on fear, and though Elara didn't know who or what Kai was, the name lodged itself in her mind like a splinter. The oddities piled up. Lights in neighboring cabins burned late, their glow visible through her window long after midnight. Footprints, too large for a dog, too deliberate for a bear, appeared in the mud near her well one morning, vanishing into the trees. And the howls, always at night, grew more frequent, their cadence almost rhythmic, as if signaling something. Elara's curiosity, already a spark, flared into a flame. She'd come to Whispering Hollow for peace, but what she found was a puzzle, a town that seemed to hum with secrets, its people bound by rules she couldn't yet grasp. In her journal, she wrote, "This place feels alive, like it's watching me as much as I'm watching it. There's something here, something they're not saying. I need to know what it is." Elara's determination grew with each passing day. She wasn't one to shy away from questions, even if the answers were guarded. She began lingering at the cafe, striking up conversations with anyone who'd talk, though most offered little beyond pleasantries. She walked the town's edges, noting the way the forest seemed to encroach, its shadows thick and unyielding, and she listened, always, to the sounds of the night, to the howls that seemed to call her name. Whispering Hollow was no ordinary town, and Elara, with her stubborn heart and relentless curiosity, was about to step deeper into its mysteries, unaware that her presence was already stirring the delicate balance the town had fought to maintain.
Elara had been in Whispering Hollow for a week, and the town's enigmatic pulse was beginning to feel like a second heartbeat. Her small cabin, with its creaking floors and cedar-scented air, was starting to resemble a home, though the valley's mysteries kept her on edge. Determined to carve out a place for herself, she ventured into town daily, her green eyes sharp with curiosity, her steps deliberate despite the locals' guarded stares. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint tang of wood smoke, and as she walked the main street, she felt the weight of Whispering Hollow's secrets pressing closer. She was an outsider, yes, but Elara was no stranger to starting over, and she was resolute in her mission to connect with this tight-knit community, even if it meant unraveling its hidden truths one thread at a time. Her first tentative friendship came unexpectedly at the Pine Kettle, the town's weathered cafe where locals gathered over steaming mugs and whispered conversations. Elara had taken to sitting at the counter, nursing a coffee and jotting notes in her journal, hoping to blend in. On her third visit, a man slid onto the stool beside her, his presence quiet but commanding. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that fell just past his ears, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room before settling on her. "You're the new one," he said, his voice low and measured, tinged with a warmth that felt deliberate. "I'm Thorn." Elara offered a cautious smile, sensing his guarded politeness. "Elara," she replied, shaking his calloused hand. Thorn carried an air of vigilance, his gaze flicking to the door or the window as if expecting trouble, yet he spoke with an ease that put her at ease. They talked briefly about the weather, the best trails for hiking, but Elara noticed how he steered clear of anything personal. His answers clipped when she asked about the town's history. Over the next few days, Elara saw Thorn often. He was a regular at the cafe, sometimes alone, sometimes with others, always watching the room with that same quiet intensity. He began to seek her out, offering small gestures of kindness, a nod when she entered, a comment about the changing leaves. Once, he helped her carry a heavy sack of flour from Hollow Goods to her truck, his silence companionable rather than cold. Elara sensed he was testing her, weighing whether she could be trusted, but she also felt a spark of connection. Thorn was different from the others, less evasive, though his guarded nature hinted at secrets he wasn't ready to share. She wrote in her journal, "Thorn's like a sentinel, always watching, but there's something kind beneath it. He knows more than he says, and I think he's waiting for me to prove I belong."
Other friendships came more slowly. Mabel, the elderly postmistress, warmed to Elara, slipping her extra stamps and sharing stories about the valley's wildflowers. A young woman named Clara, who worked at the cafe, began to chat with her about mundane things, recipes, the best spot for stargazing, though her smiles faltered whenever Elara asked about the town's quirks. These connections, fragile as they were, gave Elara a foothold, a sense that she could belong if she persisted. But the more she integrated, the more she noticed the undercurrent of whispers that followed her. At the cafe, she overheard snippets of conversation that stopped when she drew near. Two men at a corner table spoke of the clan in hushed tones, their words cut off when Elara approached with her empty mug. "Just old stories," one muttered, but his eyes avoided hers. Another time, a woman mentioned keeping the balance before glancing at Elara and falling silent. The word Kai surfaced again, spoken with a mix of awe and unease, though no one would explain who or what it meant. The nighttime sounds were harder to ignore. Every evening, as Elara sat by her cabin's fireplace, the valley came alive with noises that defied explanation. The howls she'd heard on her first night grew more frequent, their cadence almost rhythmic, as if they carried a message she couldn't decipher. Sometimes they were distant, echoing from the ridges. Other times they felt close, raising the hair on her arms. Once, As she stood by her window, a sharp, guttural sound cut through the silence. Not a howl, but a low growl, so near she froze, her breath catching. She peered into the darkness, seeing only the sway of pines, but the feeling of being watched lingered long after the sound faded. In her journal, she wrote, "The noises aren't just animals. They feel intentional, like something's out there, waiting." Elara's curiosity sharpened with each oddity. She began to linger in town, eavesdropping where she could. At the general store, she caught Amos muttering about the clan's watch to a customer, his voice dropping when he noticed her browsing nearby. At the cafe, a group of older men discussed the full moon with a seriousness that felt out of place, their conversation halting when Elara sat at the counter. She started asking questions, keeping her tone casual to avoid suspicion. "What's with the howls at night?" she asked Clara one morning, stirring her coffee. Clara hesitated. Her hands paused on the counter. She said, "Just wolves," but her glance toward the window betrayed her unease. When Elara pressed Mabel about the word Kai, the elderly woman's smile tightened. She said, "Just a name folks mention. Don't worry yourself over it." Thorn was no more forthcoming, though he seemed less dismissive. One afternoon, as they walked along the main street, Elara pointed to the forest and asked about the tracks she'd seen near her cabin, too large for a wolf, too precise for a bear. Thorn's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to the trees. "Some things in these woods don't leave normal tracks," he said, his tone careful. "Best not to wander too far at night." His words, vague yet heavy, only fueled Elara's questions. She noticed other signs. Lights in certain cabins burned until dawn, their glow visible from her window. Locals avoided certain trails, redirecting her when she asked for hiking routes. And once, she saw a group of men gathered at the town's edge, their postures tense, as if preparing for something. When she asked Thorn about it, he shrugged, his eyes distant. "Just folks keeping an eye on things," he said, but his hand rested briefly on the knife at his belt. The more Elara observed, the more she felt Whispering Hollow was a town balanced on a knife's edge, its people bound by unspoken rules. She began to piece together a picture. The howls, the cryptic phrases, the name Kai, all pointed to something larger, something the townsfolk guarded fiercely. Her journal filled with notes. The clan, some kind of group, a secret society. Kai, a leader, a myth. The howls feel like they're watching, waiting for something to happen. She didn't yet understand the full scope, but her determination grew. She'd come to Whispering Hollow for a fresh start, but what she found was a mystery that demanded solving. Thorn remained her closest ally, though his vigilance never wavered. One evening, as they sat on the cafe's porch, he spoke more openly than usual. "This town's got its ways," he said, his voice low, his eyes on the darkening forest. "You're asking questions, and that's fine, but be careful. Some answers come with a cost." Elara met his gaze, her heart pounding. "I'm not afraid of answers," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Thorn's expression softened, but only for a moment. "You might be," he replied, "once you know what they are." As they parted ways, the night air carried another howl, sharp and close, and Elara felt a surge of resolve. Whispering Hollow was hiding something, and she was determined to uncover it, no matter what lay in the shadows.
Elara had been in Whispering Hollow for nearly 2 weeks, and the town's veiled secrets were weaving themselves into her daily rhythm. Her small cabin, with its crackling fireplace and view of the shadowed pines, felt like a fragile anchor in a valley that pulsed with mystery. The howls that pierced the night, the guarded glances of the locals, and the cryptic whispers about the clan had sharpened her curiosity to a fine point. She'd begun to find her place, forming tentative bonds with people like Thorn, the vigilant local whose quiet kindness masked a deeper wariness. Yet as she moved through the town's routines, buying supplies at Hollow Goods, sipping coffee at the Pine Kettle, exchanging small talk with Mabel at the post office, a new name began to surface, one that carried a weight unlike any other: Kai. It was spoken in hushed tones, with reverence or dread, and its mention seemed to tighten the air as if the very syllables summoned an unseen presence. The first time Elara heard Kai's name, it was at the cafe, where she'd taken to lingering in hopes of catching fragments of the town's secrets. She sat at the counter, her journal open, sketching the outline of a pine tree when two older men at a nearby table lowered their voices. "Kai won't stand for it," one muttered, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug. "Not after the last time." The other nodded, glancing toward the door before replying, "He's watching, always is." Elara's pen paused, her pulse quickening. She didn't dare look up, but she strained to hear more. The conversation shifted abruptly when Clara, the barista, approached with a coffee pot, and the men fell silent, their eyes flicking to Elara as if she'd intruded. She scribbled the name in her journal, Kai, and underlined it, sensing it was a key to the town's hidden truths. Over the next few days, Kai's name surfaced again, each mention laced with a mix of awe and caution. At Hollow Goods, Amos, the scarred clerk, grumbled about missing livestock from a nearby farm, his voice low as he spoke to a customer. "Kai'll handle it," he said with a tone that implied both certainty and unease. "Always does when things go missing." Elara, pretending to browse a shelf of canned goods, caught the words and felt a chill. Missing livestock wasn't unusual in rural areas, but the way Amos spoke suggested something more sinister, something tied to the strange tracks she'd seen near her cabin, too large and deliberate for any ordinary animal. Later, at the post office, Mabel let slip a cryptic remark while sorting letters. "Kai knows the valley better than anyone," she said, her eyes distant. When Elara asked who Kai was, Mabel's smile tightened and she busied herself with a stack of envelopes. She said, "Just a man who keeps things in order," and changed the subject.
The rumors about Kai grew more tangible, linked to events that heightened the town's undercurrent of primal secrets. Whispers circulated about a farmer who'd found claw marks gouged into his barn door, deep and precise, as if made by something intelligent. Another story told of a hunter who'd vanished for 2 days, returning pale and silent, refusing to speak of what he's seen in the woods. Each tale ended with Kai's name, spoken as if he were both protector and enigma, a figure who moved unseen, yet held sway over Whispering Hollow's fate. Elara's journal filled with notes. Kai, leader? Guardian? Why does everyone fear him? Connected to the howls, the tracks. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than a man, that his presence was woven into the valley's very air. One evening, as Elara walked back to her cabin, under a sky streaked with violet, she saw Thorn near the town's edge, staring into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of impending rain, and a distant howl echoed, sharp and haunting. She approached, her boots crunching on gravel. "Thorn, who's Kai?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. He stiffened, his sharp blue eyes flicking to her before returning to the trees. "Someone you don't need to worry about yet," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. "He keeps things balanced. Elara pressed, emboldened by her growing need to understand. Balanced how? People talk about him like he's everywhere and nowhere. Thorne's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he'd walk away. Instead, he sighed, his breath visible in the cooling air. Kai is the one who steps in when things go wrong, but asking too many questions about him, it's like poking a sleeping bear. Best to let it lie. That night, as Elara sat by her fireplace, the howls returned, closer than ever, their cadence almost rhythmic, like a call and response. She stood by her window, peering into the darkness, and saw a flicker of movement, a shadow, swift and silent, darting between the pines. Her heart pounded, but she couldn't look away. The valley seemed alive, its secrets pulsing in the night, and Kai's name felt like the key to unlocking them. She wrote in her journal, "Kai is the shadow behind the howls, the reason people whisper. I don't know if he's a man or a myth, but he's tied to whatever's out there. I need to find out more." The next day, Elara overheard another fragment at the cafe. A woman, her voice low, spoke of Kai's rules to a companion, mentioning a curfew no one dared break. She said, "After what happened to those sheep, he'll be watching closer." Alara's mind raced. Watching for what? The claw marks? The missing animals? The howls? All seemed to point to a force beyond the ordinary, and Kai was at its center. She felt a mix of fear and fascination, her resolve hardening. Whispering Hollow was no ordinary town, and Kai, whoever or whatever he was, held the answers to its primal secrets. Elara knew she was treading dangerous ground, but her curiosity burned brighter than her caution, pulling her deeper into the mystery that defined the valley. Elara's 27th birthday arrived under a crisp autumn sky, the kind that painted Whispering Hollow in shades of amber and gold. 3 weeks into her life in the secluded valley, she had carved out a fragile sense of belonging, though the town's secrets, whispers of the clan, the name Kai, and the haunting howls, kept her curiosity on edge. Her small cabin, now warmed by the glow of a fireplace and adorned with a few personal touches, felt like the perfect place to mark the occasion. Elara decided to host a modest gathering, inviting the handful of locals who'd shown her kindness: Thorne, the vigilant man with sharp blue eyes; Mabel, the warm but cryptic postmistress; and Clara, the cautious barista from the Pine Kettle. The invitation was a gesture of hope, a way to bridge the gap between outsider and community. But as the evening unfolded, an undercurrent of tension and an unexpected gift would pull Elara deeper into Whispering Hollow's enigmatic web. The gathering began at dusk, with string lights strung across her cabin's porch, casting a soft glow over the wooden steps. Elara had prepared simple fare: fresh bread from the cafe, a pot of hearty stew, and a bottle of cider Mabel had gifted her. The air carried the scent of pine and smoke, and laughter spilled from the porch as her guests arrived. Mabel brought a knitted scarf, its wool dyed a deep forest green, and Clara offered a jar of homemade jam, her smile warm but fleeting. Thorne arrived last, carrying a small carved wooden box, his expression a mix of warmth and his usual vigilance. He said, "For your trinkets." He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Elara thanked them, her heart buoyed by their presence, though she couldn't shake the feeling that their eyes held something unspoken, pitied perhaps, or a warning she couldn't yet decipher. Inside, the cabin hummed with conversation, the fire crackling as music played softly from an old radio. Elara moved between her guests, refilling mugs and sharing stories of her city days, careful to keep the mood light. Yet, beneath the surface, tension simmered. Mabel's laughter faltered when Elara mentioned the howls she'd heard, her eyes darting to Thorne before she changed the subject to the weather. Clara,
usually chatty, grew quiet when a distant howl echoed through the valley, her hands tightening around her mug. Thorn lingered near the edges of the room, his sharp gaze flicking to the windows whenever the conversation veered toward the forest or the strange tracks Elara had seen. "You've settled in well," he said at one point, his tone careful, but his eyes seemed to ask a question he wouldn't voice. Elara felt a prickle at the back of her neck, a sense that the warmth of the gathering masked something heavier, something her guests knew but wouldn't share. As the evening wore on, Elara's own laughter grew strained. She stood by an open window, the cool air brushing her face, and felt that same watched sensation she'd noted in her journal. The howls had grown louder, closer, their cadence almost deliberate, and she caught Thorn glancing at her, his expression unreadable. "Nighttime prowlers," Mabel said lightly when Elara mentioned the sounds, but her smile was tight, and Clara quickly offered to refill the cider. The room felt smaller, the air charged with an unease no one acknowledged. Elara tried to shake it off, toasting her guests with a forced grin, but the weight of their glances, Thorn's vigilance, Mabel's guarded warmth, Clara's sudden silences, lingered like a shadow. The gathering wound down without incident, the guests departing with well wishes and promises to meet again. Elara stood on her porch, watching their figures fade into the night, the string lights swaying in the breeze. The cabin felt empty now, littered with half-melted candles and empty mugs, but the unease clung to her. She was about to lock the door when a sharp, insistent knock startled her. Her heart skipped. None of her guests had lingered, and the hour was late. Cautiously, she opened the door to find a cloaked figure, face obscured by shadow, holding a small, unmarked box. "For you," the figure said, voice low and unfamiliar, before turning and vanishing into the darkness. Elara's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she clutched the box, its wood smooth and cold. Inside, by the flickering firelight, she opened it to reveal a silver pendant, its surface etched with intricate, swirling runes that seemed to shimmer faintly. Tucked beside it was a note, a single line in elegant script. "A birthday is no small occasion here." No signature, no explanation, but the words carried an authority that sent a chill through her. Elara's mind raced. How did anyone know it was her birthday? She hadn't shared the date beyond her small circle of guests. The pendant felt heavy in her hand, its craftsmanship both beautiful and unsettling, as if it held a purpose she couldn't yet grasp. She thought of Kai, the name whispered with fear and reverence, and wondered if this was his doing. Had he been watching her, as the townsfolk hinted? In her journal, she wrote, "The pendant feels like a key, but to what? Someone knows I'm here, knows more than I've told." Kai? As she sat by the fire, the pendant in her palm, the night grew colder. A faint gust rattled the windows, and another howl sliced through the silence, closer than ever. Elara's pulse quickened, her thoughts spiraling. The gathering had been a step toward belonging, but the gift and its cryptic note suggested she was already entangled in something larger, something tied to the valley's primal secrets. She felt the weight of Whispering Hollow's gaze, as if the town itself was waiting to see what she would do next. Elara's birthday had ended hours ago, leaving her cabin steeped in an uneasy quiet. The string lights on the porch had been unplugged, and the remnants of her small celebration, empty mugs, crumpled napkins, and half-burned candles, littered the wooden table. The silver pendant, delivered by a mysterious courier with its cryptic note, rested on her nightstand, its etched runes catching the faint glow of the dying fire. Elara sat on her bed, her journal open, pen hovering over the page as she tried to make sense of the night's events. The warmth of her guest's company, Mabel's knitted scarf, Clara's jam, Thorne's carved box, felt overshadowed by their guarded glances and the ominous gift. Outside, Whispering Hollow was silent, save for the occasional rustle of pines, but the valley's ever-present howls had grown quiet, leaving an oppressive stillness that set her nerves on edge. She wrote, "The pendant feels like a warning, but I don't know what it's warning me of. This town is holding its breath." Past midnight, as Elara set her journal aside, a sharp gust rattled the cabin windows, the sound like fingers tapping impatiently on glass. She froze, her heart thudding, and listened. The air felt charged, heavy with the same electric tension she'd sensed since arriving in Whispering Hollow. Then came a sound, low, guttural, not a howl, but a growl, so close it seemed to rise from just beyond her porch. Her breath caught, and she stood, moving to the window, her fingers brushing the pendant as if it could anchor her. Peering into the darkness, she saw nothing but swaying branches, yet the growl lingered, a raw, predatory sound that vibrated in her chest. She told herself it was just an animal. Whispering Hollow was deep in the wilderness, after all. But the noise carried an intelligence, a purpose that chilled her. Before she could step back, a deafening crash shattered the silence. The bedroom window exploded inward, shards of glass spraying across the floor, embedding in the wooden walls with a force that splintered timber. Elara stumbled back, her scream caught in her throat as a massive silhouette filled the ruined window frame. It was no ordinary beast. Hulking, low to the ground, its fur matted and dark, its muzzle drawn back in a snarl that revealed gleaming teeth. Yellow eyes burned with malice, locking onto her with an intensity that froze her in place. The scent of wet fur and something metallic flooded the room, and Elara's mind struggled to process what she faced. The locals' whispers of the clan and Kai flashed through her thoughts. This was no wolf, not in any natural sense.
Instinct kicked in, and Elara scrambled backward, half tangled in her quilt, groping for anything to defend herself. Her fingers brushed a lamp, then a chair, but the creature lunged before she could act. Its claws raked across her forearm, tearing through flesh and sending a hot spike of pain up her arm. Blood smeared the sheets as she cried out, the sound slicing through the night. The beast circled, its movements deliberate, almost human in their precision, its breath harsh and guttural. Elara's vision blurred, panic flooding her senses as she crawled toward the dresser, desperate to put distance between herself and the intruder. The creature pinned her against the wood, its weight crushing the air from her lungs, its breath hot and reeking of copper. Her wounded arm throbbed, and she felt the world narrowing to the gleam of its teeth and the predatory glow of its eyes. In that moment, when Elara thought the end had come, a roar tore through the chaos, fierce, authoritative, drowning out the rogue's snarl. A second form burst through the shattered window, a blur of motion and power that collided with the creature in a crash of splintering furniture. Elara's vision swam, but she glimpsed a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with impossible speed. Was it a man? A beast? The lines blurred as the two forces clashed, snarls and growls filling the air. The rogue recoiled, its aggression faltering under the newcomer's onslaught. Elara, pinned and bleeding, caught fragments of the scene, a flash of dark fur, a glint of steel-like eyes, and a voice, deep, commanding, snapping a single word that made the rogue flinch. The fight ended as swiftly as it began, the rogue retreating through the broken window with a final defiant snarl. Elara's strength faltered,
her body slumping against the dresser as shock and blood loss took hold. The shadowy protector turned to her, his features obscured in the dim light, but his presence radiated a quiet authority. Strong arms lifted her, cradling her against a warmth that cut through the night's chill. "Hold on," he murmured, his voice low and resolute, carrying her outside where the air stung her wounds. Elara's consciousness flickered, but she clung to the sensation of being carried, the sound of his steady breaths, and the faint glow of the pendant still clutched in her hand. In her haze, she thought of Kai, the name whispered with fear and reverence. Was this him? Her journal, left open on the bed, would later read, "Something attacked me, something not human, and someone saved me. Kai? I don't know, but I'm not alone anymore."
Elara's consciousness flickered like a candle in a storm, her mind struggling to piece together the fragments of the night before. The last thing she remembered was the chaos of the attack, the shattered window, the rogue creature's snarl, the searing pain in her forearm, and the shadowy figure who'd driven the beast away. Now, as awareness crept back, she found herself in an unfamiliar place, far from the familiar creak of her cabin's floorboards. The air was heavy with the scent of pinewood smoke and something earthier, like damp stone and herbs. She lay on a narrow bed, her body aching, her arm throbbing beneath tight bandages. The room was dim, lit by a single lantern casting long shadows across rough-hewn stone walls and thick wooden beams. A heavy door stood closed, muffling distant footsteps and murmurs that hinted at unseen presences. Elara's heart pounded as she realized she was no longer in her cabin. She was somewhere else, somewhere hidden, and the weight of Whispering Hollow's secrets pressed closer than ever. Her first attempt to sit up sent a jolt of pain through her arm, forcing a gasp from her lips. The bandages, stained with faint traces of blood, covered a wound that felt unnaturally hot, as if something burned beneath her skin. She touched the dressing gingerly, wincing, and noticed the silver pendant from her birthday still hung around her neck, its runes cool against her chest. Her journal was gone, left behind in the wreckage of her cabin, but the memory of the attack was vivid, too vivid. The creature's yellow eyes, the scent of wet fur, and the commanding voice of her rescuer haunted her. Was it Kai, the enigmatic figure the townsfolk whispered about? She had no answers, only questions, and the realization that her survival had come at a cost she didn't yet understand. The room felt like a sanctuary and a prison. Its stone walls were solid, unyielding, and the air carried a hush as if the very building demanded silence. Elara's senses, usually sharp, felt heightened in a way that unnerved her. The creak of a floorboard beyond the door was piercingly clear, and the faint smell of herbal tincture stung her nose with unnatural intensity. She tried to stand, her legs unsteady, and caught herself against a wooden table. A small vial sat there, filled with a dark liquid that shimmered faintly in the lantern light. Before she could examine it, the door creaked open, revealing a figure. A woman with graying hair and stern eyes, carrying a tray of cloths and a bowl of steaming water. "You're awake," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "Lie back. You're not ready to move." Elara obeyed, her mind racing. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse. The woman's eyes flicked to the bandages, then back to Elara's face. "Somewhere safe," she said, setting the tray down. "You are hurt. We're helping you." Her tone left no room for questions, but Elara pressed on. "Who's we? Is this the clan?" The woman's hands paused, and for a moment, Elara thought she'd answer. Instead, she began changing the bandages, her movements precise. "Rest," she said. "Someone will explain soon." The name Kai hovered on Elara's tongue, but the woman's stern glance silenced her. As the fresh bandages were applied, Elara noticed the wound, a jagged bite mark, its edges strangely etched, as if the venom had left a pattern beneath her skin. A chill ran through her.
not just from pain, but from the realization that her body felt different.
Over the next hours, Elara drifted between fevered sleep and fleeting awareness. Each time she woke, the room was the same. Stone walls, heavy beams, the ever-present hush. Unseen figures came and went, checking her wounds, administering tinctures that dulled the pain but left her mind foggy. She caught snippets of their conversations, murmured beyond the door. The bite's taken hold, Kai's orders. She's strong, but it's unpredictable. The words sent a shiver through her. The bite wasn't just a wound. It was changing her in ways she couldn't comprehend. Her senses flared unpredictably. The sound of footsteps echoed like thunder. The scent of herbs overwhelmed her. And once, she swore she felt a presence outside the room. Not human, but animal, pacing with a restless energy. In one lucid moment, Elara sat up, clutching the pendant. Her arm burned, but her mind was clear enough to question her situation. She was in a lodge, she guessed, hidden somewhere in Whispering Hollow's valley, a stronghold for the clan, the mysterious group tied to the howls and Kai's name. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She'd come to the town for a fresh start, but now she was entangled in something primal, something the locals had guarded with their cryptic warnings. Her journal, if she'd had it, would have read, "I'm not just healing. Something's changing inside me. The clan knows, but they won't tell me what. Kai's behind this, I'm sure of it." As dawn approached, the door opened again and a new figure entered, tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that seemed to pierce the dim light. His presence filled the room, commanding yet restrained, and Elara's breath caught. Was this Kai? He set another vial on the table, his movements deliberate. "Drink," he said, his voice low and authoritative, carrying the same iron-like resolve she'd heard during the attack. Elara hesitated, then swallowed the tincture, its bitter taste grounding her as the fire in her arm eased slightly. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice trembling. His gaze met hers, unreadable. "Someone who can help," he said. "Rest now." He left without another word, but his presence lingered, as did the certainty that he was tied to the clan's secrets and to her transformation. Elara lay back, her mind swirling. The lodge, the clan, the bite, they were reshaping her, pulling her into a world where human boundaries no longer held. She felt the pendant's weight, a symbol of her deeper involvement, and knew that whatever lay ahead, she was no longer just an outsider in Whispering Hollow. Elara's world had shifted irrevocably since the night of the attack. The hidden lodge, with its stone walls and pervasive scent of pinewood smoke, had become her refuge and her crucible. Days had passed since she awoke in this stronghold, her arm bandaged, her body thrumming with changes she couldn't fully grasp. The bite from the rogue creature had left more than a wound. It had ignited something primal within her, sharpening her senses to an almost unbearable intensity. Sounds were too loud, smells too potent, and a restless energy coiled in her veins, threatening to unravel her. The clan, as she now understood her caretakers to be, watched her closely, their hushed murmurs and guarded glances hinting at a purpose she was only beginning to uncover. At the center of it all was Kai, the enigmatic figure whose commanding presence had saved her life and now loomed over her transformation. Under his stern guidance, Elara was about to face her first true test, learning to control the beast awakening inside her. The training began at dawn in the lodge's secluded courtyard, a clearing ringed by towering pines and jagged stones. Elara stood shivering in the crisp morning air, her bandaged arm aching with a heat that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The silver pendant from her birthday hung around her neck, its runes a constant reminder of her entanglement with Whispering Hollow's secrets.
Kai stood before her, his broad frame casting a long shadow, his steel-gray eyes assessing her with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and resolute. Around them, a handful of clan members watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Among them was Leora, a tall woman with sharp features and a gaze that cut like a blade. Elara had noticed her before, always lingering near Kai, her posture possessive, her eyes flashing with barely concealed resentment whenever Elara was near. The air crackled with tension, and Elara sensed that her presence threatened a delicate balance within the clan. Kai's voice broke the silence, low and unyielding. He said, "The bite has changed you. It's given you strength, senses, instincts, but they'll destroy you if you don't learn to control them." He gestured to the courtyard, where a single stone slab stood, etched with faint runes similar to those on her pendant. "We start simple. Listen. Find the sounds beyond the obvious." Elara nodded, her throat tight, and closed her eyes, trying to focus. The task seemed trivial, but as she reached for her heightened senses, a flood of noise overwhelmed her. The rustle of leaves, the distant snap of a twig, the heartbeat of a bird overhead. Her head spun and she stumbled, gasping. Kai's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus. Pick one sound. Let the rest fade." His tone was stern, not cruel, but it demanded obedience. Elara tried again, her breath ragged. She latched onto the faint drip of water from a nearby stream, forcing her mind to block out the rest. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her arm throbbed, the bite mark pulsing as if alive. After what felt like an eternity, she succeeded, the drip becoming clear while other sounds dulled. She opened her eyes, trembling, to find Kai nodding slightly. "Good," he said. "Now do it again." The clan members murmured, some impressed, others skeptical, but Leora's expression was icy, her arms crossed tightly. Elara felt her stare like a weight, a silent challenge that spoke of rivalry she hadn't sought. The exercises grew harder. Kai pushed Elara to identify scents, pine sap, damp earth, the musky trace of a clan member across the courtyard. Each success left her dizzy, her body torn between human caution and the wild instincts surging within. Leora's presence added to the strain. During a break, as Elara sipped water, Leora approached, her voice low and sharp. "You think you can just step into this?" she said, her eyes flicking to Kai, who was speaking with another clan member. "This isn't your place, outsider." Elara met her gaze, her own resolve hardening. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her arm. "But I'm here, and I'm learning." Leora's lip curled, and she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Stay out of my way, or you'll regret it." Before Elara could respond, Kai's sharp glance silenced Leora, who retreated with a glare. The day wore on, each exercise testing Elara's limits. Kai guided her through physical drills, slow, deliberate movements to channel the volatile energy in her blood. She felt it surge, a heat that made her muscles twitch, urging her to run, to fight, to snarl. Kai's presence anchored her, his commands a tether when she teetered on the edge of losing control. "Breathe," he said, his voice cutting through her rising panic. "The beast is part of you, but you decide its path." Elara clung to his words, her body trembling as she forced the energy to subside. The clan watched, some nodding in approval, others whispering doubts. Leora stood apart, her hostility palpable, a reminder that Elara's transformation threatened more than just her own identity. It stirred tensions within the clan's hierarchy. By dusk, Elara was exhausted, her muscles burning, her mind reeling from the effort of harnessing her new senses.
Kai dismissed the others, but as they dispersed, Leora lingered, her gaze locked on Elara. "You're not one of us," she said softly, her words laced with venom. "Not yet." Elara held her ground, the pendant heavy against her chest. "I'm trying," she said, her voice low but firm. Leora's eyes narrowed, but she turned and vanished into the shadows. In her journal, if she'd had it, Elara would have written, "Kai's pushing me to control something I don't understand. Leora hates me for it, and I don't know why, but I won't back down." As the courtyard emptied, Kai approached, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said, his voice softer now. "But this is only the beginning." Elara nodded, her arm throbbing, her senses still humming. She was changing, and under Kai's guidance, she was learning to wield that change. But the growing rivalry with Leora and the clan's watchful eyes told her the path ahead would be as treacherous as the beast within. The air in Whispering Hollow felt charged as twilight descended, painting the sky in hues of amber and violet. Elara stood at the edge of the clan's hidden lodge, her heart pounding, the silver pendant around her neck a heavy reminder of the path she'd been thrust upon. Weeks had passed since the rogue creature's attack, and under Kai's stern tutelage, she'd begun to harness the primal energy coursing through her veins. Her senses, heightened to an almost painful clarity, picked up every rustle of leaves, every distant heartbeat. But controlling them was a battle she was only beginning to win. Tonight, she faced a reckoning, a ritual test at an ancient site, where she would prove her mastery over the transformation or risk rejection by the clan. The courtyard buzzed with tension, and Elara felt the weight of every gaze. Kai's unyielding scrutiny, Thorn's quiet concern, and Leora's barely concealed hostility. The trial would test not just her abilities, but her place in a clan divided by her presence. Escorted by Thorn, Elara was led through dense forest trails, the pines closing in like silent sentinels. His usual vigilance was tempered by a solemn air, his blue eyes meeting hers briefly. "Stay focused," he murmured, his voice low. "You're stronger than you think." Behind them, Leora followed, her silence sharp, her posture radiating a challenge. The path opened to a hidden clearing, where massive stone slabs formed a broad ring, their surfaces etched with runes that glowed faintly under the waning light. The standing stones, as the clan called them, were a place of ancient ritual, reserved for moments that shaped the clan's future. Elara's breath caught as she stepped into the circle, sensing the weight of history in the air. The clan gathered, forming a ring that mirrored the stones, their faces a mix of curiosity, doubt, and expectation. Kai stood at the center, his broad frame statue-like, his gray eyes unreadable but commanding. A grizzled elder cleared his throat, signaling the start of the ceremony. No howls broke the silence. This was a moment of judgment, not celebration. Kai addressed the assembly, his voice resonant. "Tonight, we test one marked by a rogue. She has trained, struggled, survived. Now we see if her fate binds her to us, or if the venom will break her." His gaze locked on Elara, and he gestured for her to step forward. Her stomach twisted, but she squared her shoulders, the ache in her bandaged arm a constant reminder of the bite that had changed her. Thorn stepped aside, his expression unreadable, while Leora's eyes burned with a challenge: prove yourself or fail. Testimonies came first, brief and pointed.
A clan member praised Elara's resilience, noting her ability to pinpoint distant sounds during training. Another, more wary, warned of the rogue's taint, warning of its unpredictability. Leora spoke last, her tone measured but laced with venom. "She's shown strength," she said, her gaze flicking to Elara, "but strength alone doesn't make a wolf. She must prove she values our safety over her own impulses or her ambitions." The words cut, a clear accusation that Elara sought to disrupt the clan's hierarchy. Whispers rippled through the circle, and Elara felt the weight of their doubt, her own fears clawing at her resolve. Had she pushed too far, too fast? Kai silenced the murmurs with a raised hand, his authority absolute. He pointed to a single stone slab, its runes more intricate than the others, pulsing with a faint silver light. "Touch the stone," he said. "Let it draw out your power. Control it, and you claim your place. Fail, and the consequences are yours." Elara's pulse hammered as she approached, her senses buzzing with the clan's collective tension. She pressed her palm to the cold, rough surface, and instantly a heat flared in her core, spreading like wildfire. The venom in her blood surged, tugging at the beast within, and her vision flickered, human clarity warring with primal instinct. Her arm burned, the bite mark glowing faintly, and a tremor shook her body. She fought the urge to pull away, her nails scraping the stone as a muffled cry escaped her lips. The clan leaned in, some braced to intervene, others frozen in anticipation. Leora watched with cold detachment, her lips pressed thin, while Thorn flinched, his hands clenching as if resisting the urge to step forward. Kai's fists tightened, his gaze unwavering. Elara's body convulsed, the stone amplifying the transformation, urging it to break free. Memories of Kai's training flooded her, his commands to breathe, to focus, to tether the beast to her will. She clung to them, forcing her human consciousness to hold firm. The runes glowed brighter, their light tracing her veins, and she felt the beast's hunger, wild, untamed, demanding release. Her muscles tensed, her breath ragged, but she refused to let it win. Sweat dripped from her temples, and time blurred, the world narrowing to the stone's vibration and her own desperate struggle. Slowly, painfully, Elara coaxed the energy back, her human will wrestling the beast into submission. The glow in her arm faded, her vision cleared, and with a final shuddering breath, she released the stone, stumbling back. Kai and Thorn caught her, their hands steadying her as she gasped for air. The clan was silent, the air thick with awe. Her eyes, though bright with lingering power, were human again. No claws, no feral snarl. She had controlled the beast. Whispers broke out, some nodding in respect, others stunned. Leora's cassade cracked, her expression flickering between frustration and reluctant acknowledgement. Kai's stern gaze softened, a grudging nod signaling her success. "You've proven yourself," he said, his voice low but final. The ceremony ended quietly, the clan dispersing into the shadows, leaving Elara standing in the fading light, her place among them secured, but her journey far from over.
Barely a week had passed since Elara's triumphant trial at the Standing Stones, but the air in Whispering Hollow thrummed with unrest. Her acceptance into the clan had shifted the delicate balance of power, stirring whispers and sidelong glances among the members. Elara felt it keenly. The heightened senses from her transformation amplified every murmur, every heartbeat laced with doubt or envy.
Kai's nod of approval had solidified her place, but it also ignited smoldering jealousies, particularly in Leora, whose resentment had festered into something dangerous. Once a close ally to Kai, Leora's position felt threatened by this outsider who'd not only survived the rogue's bite, but had proven her mastery over it. Elara's growing bond with Thorn, the clan's steadfast sentinel, only fueled Leora's rage, turning internal friction into a spark that would soon ignite a devastating fire. The first signs of betrayal emerged subtly. Rumors trickled through the lodge, distant sightings of unfamiliar wolves skirting the valley's borders, their movements too bold for mere wanderers. Livestock vanished from outlying farms, claw marks left as deliberate taunts. Kai, ever vigilant, summoned scouts to patrol the ridges, but the reports grew alarming. These intruders seemed to know Whispering Hollow's defenses intimately, slipping through hidden trails only the clan should know. Elara, training in the courtyard, overheard the whispers. "It's like they've got a map of our secrets." Her stomach twisted as she pieced it together. Someone inside had betrayed them. That night, as howls echoed closer than ever, Leora disappeared, her absence a glaring void that confirmed the clan's darkest fears. Kai's face hardened when the news broke, his gray eyes storming with fury and betrayal. "She's allied with outsiders," he said, his voice low but resonant in the lodge's great hall. The clan gathered, tension thick as fog, their faces etched with shock. Leora, driven by jealousy over Elara's rise and her perceived claim on Kai's attention, had bargained with a rival pack, fierce wanderers from distant mountains, hungry for territory. In exchange for secrets, she'd promised them dominance, her vengeance aimed at dismantling the clan from within. Elara felt a pang of guilt. Had her presence caused this? But Thorn's hand on her shoulder steadied her. "This is on her, not you," he said, his voice firm. "We stand together now." Kai's orders came swift. Prepare for defense. The clan mobilized, sharpening claws and senses, but Elara knew this clash would test more than their strength. It would forge or shatter alliances. The attack came under a storm-laden sky, lightning cracking like whips over the peaks. The rival packs struck at the valley's outer slopes, their howls mingling with thunder as they charged in disciplined waves. Elara, positioned on a ridge with Thorn, felt the beast within stir, her senses alive with the scent of rain and blood. The intruders were few, but ferocious. Their knowledge of the terrain, courtesy of Leora, allowing them to flank and ambush. Skirmishes erupted in the hollows, wolves clashing in half-shifts, jaws snapping, claws rending fur and flesh. Elara fought alongside Thorn, her training kicking in as she anticipated strikes, her heightened instincts guiding her through the chaos. She alerted the flank to a lurking ambush, her voice cutting through the storm. "To the left, 3 incoming!" Thorn nodded, his form blurring as he shifted, driving back the assailants in a whirlwind of teeth and fury. At the battle's heart, Kai confronted the rival Alpha, a scarred brute whose snarls echoed Leora's betrayal. Lightning illuminated the melee, rain pounding the earth into mud. Elara and Thorn pressed forward, back to back, repelling lungers with coordinated strikes. Elara's arm throbbed, the bite mark pulsing with energy, but she channeled it, her movements fluid and primal. Amid the fray, Leora's name rose in taunts from the rivals. "She promised us your secrets," confirming her treachery. Elara's resolve hardened. This wasn't just survival, it was justice. A rival wolf lunged at her, but she dodged, countering with a slash that sent it retreating. Thorn, battered but unyielding, fought with a ferocity that mirrored her own, their alliance solidifying in the heat of combat. The storm raged, thunder rumbling as Kai cornered the rival Alpha in a burst of speed and power.
With a decisive snap, he felled the leader, his howl piercing the night as the intruders faltered. Leaderless and wounded, the rival pack broke, fleeing into the shadows with panicked yelps. Rain mingled with blood on the churned earth, the valley's slopes slick and scarred. The clan seized the upper hand, driving the remnants away. But Elara was nowhere among the fallen. Whispers spread, she'd vanished, perhaps wounded, perhaps plotting anew, her betrayal unresolved, like a ghost in the mist. Elara, bruised and panting, scanned the field, her senses picking up no trace of her rival. Thorn turned to her, exhaustion lining his face. "She's gone," he said, relief and wariness in his voice. "For now." In the aftermath, as dawn broke in pale streaks, the clan regrouped in the lodge. Kai surveyed the survivors, his brow furrowed, the cost of Leora's actions etched in every weary face. She had shared their history, their defenses, nearly tearing the clan apart. Yet through the thunder and blood, bonds had strengthened. Elara, no longer an outsider, had proven pivotal, her actions in battle cementing her place. Kai approached her, his expression grudgingly respectful. "You fought like one of us," he said, a nod sealing their alliance. Thorn's smile, measured but genuine, spoke of a deeper connection forged in the clash. The clan honored the fallen, rebuilding with a wary eye on the horizons, the scar of betrayal lingering, but the valley standing victorious. Whispering Hollow would mend, its secrets guarded anew, but Leora's fate hung like a shadow, wounded, vengeful, or vanished forever. For Elara, the battle had resolved conflicts, solidifying her role in a world of primal loyalties. The clan's oldest traditions had bent to include her, and as the sun rose, a new era dawned, where alliances were ironclad and threats met with unity. Like, share, and subscribe to show the author support and love.